Look, let's not beat around the bush. We all know that the X-Men movie timeline is a little bit broken, but until recently, I didn't know just how bad it ended up getting. I, along with most people, was of the belief that there were two timelines, the pre-Days of Future Past timeline and the post-Days of Future Past timeline. But I've had the X-Men movies on my mind recently, for obvious reasons, and I had a realization. It's worse than any of us thought. So I did some more thinking, usually a bad idea, and stupid joke. So I did some more thinking, and I figured it out. There aren't two timelines. There aren't even three timelines. There are at least 4 timelines within these 13 movies. Yes, you heard me. 4. Now follow me, and let me show you what I've discovered. So like I said, most everybody thinks that there are 2 timelines in these movies. For those who don't know, this is probably a little bit confusing, so I'll explain. When the movies first started coming out, they were really good, until they weren't. But then they got better, but then the really awful movies were still canon, so they decided that wouldn't fly. They then got hard at work making the best X-Men movie they ever would make. On May 10th, 2014, X-Men Days of Future Past premiered in New York, and everything was set right. In Days of Future Past, the X-Men send Wolverine back in time to stop a mutant apocalypse in the future. He succeeds, but unsurprisingly this has an effect on the timeline. From then on out, it seemed that everything released before 2014 was in the old timeline, and everything released after, as well as the good movies from before, became the new timeline, and all was well and good again. But was it? You see, as I said, I've been thinking, and I think I figured out a dark secret that Fox doesn't want you to know. If there really are only 2 timelines, then they're the most broken, plot hole-filled timelines ever made. I made my own timeline map to show you what I believe the most streamlined version of this whole thing could possibly be. So we start the same way as before, with what I want to call the prime timeline. It starts with First Class and goes all the way through until Days of Future Past, which is where this happens. 1 timeline becomes 3. Now I hear you wondering how I've reached this conclusion. At the end of Days of Future Past, we see this. This is the X-Men in the same time period as a previous hellscape of the future portions of the movie. But now Logan has set the timeline right. This is what we'll call the classic timeline. We still get X-Men 1 and 2, and we get the happy ending of Days of Future Past. Then, somewhere along the line, this turns into Logan. Now how do we know that these movies fit into this timeline? Well, the whole point of Days of Future Past was to make it so that we could have the good old movies, and the bad ones didn't exist anymore. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, that's all well and good, but how do we know that Logan still comes here, and not in any of the other timelines? In Logan, Logan knows that his real name is James Howlett. We also know that Caliban is in Apocalypse, which is set in the 80s, so unless they cast Stephen Merchant as a 70-year-old, I think these are different versions of the character, meaning Logan can't be set in this timeline. And lastly, we know that the Logan in Logan is the Logan from the previous timeline, because Xavier mentioned that he found Logan as a cage fighter, and he talks about the end of the first movie.
When I found you, you were pursuing a career as a cage fighter, a warm capper to a life as an assassin. They're waiting for you at the Statue of Liberty.
Statue of Liberty was a long time ago, Charles, a long time.
Logan doesn't have any memories of this timeline from 1973 till sometime in the 2020s. So for him to know what Xavier is talking about, then he would have to have lived through the events of the first X-Men movie, which only took place in the Prime and Classic timelines. So that's 2 of the timelines explained. Now we can take a look at the 3rd timeline. I'm going to dub this the altered timeline, because even if the Classic timeline was a change from the Prime timeline, it was not changed anywhere near as much as this. The altered timeline is everything released since Days of Future Past except for Logan. It's pretty obvious that this is its own timeline, characters meet that previously didn't meet for decades, and events take place well before they used to, so that's pretty easy. We also know the Deadpool movies fit in here because in Deadpool 2 we see the X-Men of the 90s, and nobody ages in these movies, so that fits nicely. Finally we get here. You might have noticed this little line that's been hiding down here the entire video. This is the 4th timeline. The I don't fucking know timeline. Because I don't fucking know where these go in any other timeline. Now, New Mutants could yet prove to fit within any of the other timelines, and from what I've heard I think it does, but I haven't actually seen it yet, because in case you missed it, we're actually in a global pandemic and shouldn't be going to the movie theaters. But this garbage fire of a movie, this is the enigma. X-Men Origins Wolverine. No matter what you do to it, it doesn't fit in any of the timelines. It doesn't fit into the altered timeline because we see in Apocalypse that Wolverine was in a different facility than in Origins, so that rules that out. But we have the exact same problem with X2. The facility in Alkali Lake in Origins is also completely different to that facility. So which is it? Not only that, but in Origins, Wolverine saves Emma Frost and Scott Summers at the end of the movie, but this makes absolutely no sense. If Emma Frost is a fully grown woman in the 60s, how is she now a teenager decades later? And if Wolverine saves Scott's life, don't you think that that'd be something he'd remember? So then why does Scott not remember Logan in the original X-Men movies? Maybe because he's blind! Okay, still doesn't fit. In Days of Future Past, we see a depressed, powerless, but walking Charles. Xavier can only walk because of a serum that Hank made for him that allows him to walk but represses his abilities.
I wanted to help do something, so I designed the serum to treat his spine. Derived from the same formula that helps me control my mutation. He just couldn't bear the pain, the voices. The treatment gives him his legs, but it's not enough.
And why does he take this serum? Because of the events of First Class. And because we know Origins and First Class go together about as well as chocolate and dog shit, Origins can't go in the classic timeline. Because in that timeline, the 70s were changed by the events of Days of Future Past. And we can see that Charles was taking the serum in this timeline. Okay, so we know it doesn't go in the altered or classic timeline. So what about the prime timeline? Well, that's covered too. In Days of Future Past, Xavier says this.
I didn't have my powers in 1973. Logan, you're going to have to do for me what I once did for you. I was a very different man then. You'll have to be patient with me.
Charles was depressed and taking Hank's serum in the prime timeline as well. And remember why Charles was taking the serum? First Class. So Origins can't be here either. Also, in Origins itself, in the 80s, I want to say, I'm not looking up anything for this movie. Anyway, we see Xavier walking and using his powers after the 1960s, and that should not be possible in any timeline.
I can hear your thoughts.
Yes, and I can hear yours. You're safe now.
The serum means he can't have one with the other, so how does he have both? This movie can't be connected to X-Men Apocalypse for obvious reasons, and it can't be connected to the original X-Men trilogy for obvious reasons. So where does it fit? It doesn't, in any of the established timelines. It doesn't even fit with First Class, the most removed movie in the entire franchise. It's set before everything else, and they couldn't even get that right. Granted, that may have more to do with First Class and Origins itself, but my point still stands. This movie doesn't fit with any other movie in the franchise. It breaks my brain, but hey, at least you never have to watch it again. So yeah, this is, as best as I could figure, the most accurate timeline map of the Fox X-Men movies that I could put together. And I thought about this for a very long time. Anyway, outro screen. Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you very, very much for watching it. I put a lot of effort into this one, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. It really helps have more people see the video and get it out there. So if you left a like, that'd be greatly appreciated. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.